All right, well, welcome back into GEARHAULICS, everybody. Happy New Year. This is the podcast where every ounce counts, and the only grams that Snackbox is thinking about out on trail are his honey grams. So welcome back in, everybody. We got Jared, a.k.a. Snackbox from Outside Comfort Zone, Melissa, Melgiver from Unlikely Hiker. I'm just going to keep saying it until you tell me to stop, so I'm just going to stick with that one. And for the first time ever on this podcast, and he's feeling a little bit that it's like due that he should show up for this one because he missed the live stream for my Christmas stream. It's Devin Ashby from Backcountry Exposure. What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. How's everybody feeling?
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Feeling
Happy
good.
New Year, everybody.
Feeling very
Awesome.
good.
Thanks for joining the first one of the new year in 2024. And this one is all about, I'm going to throw it up on screen here, backpacking efficiency. And this is something that I had thought about before. And then Melissa, when we were out on the TCT in 2023, we kind of brought this one back up, but she says she doesn't really remember, bringing that one up. But it kind of got me thinking. This is really sort of like going to be a backpacking hacks and pro tips, where we are each going to share one of our, or like different topics on how we kind of do things. It doesn't necessarily have to be gear centric. It could be like trip planning or meal prep or stuff like that. Just different anecdotes that we have personally. Again, everything is subjective, but this is kind of the stuff that works for us to make our trips run a little bit more smoothly and a little bit easier. So hopefully you can get something out of this. It might not work for you, but it might. And I polled everybody, and they basically said, Dave, you go first because it's still a little bit confusing. So I have a tendency to do that with my topics. So let me just dive right into my first one, which is going to talk about gear wrangling when you're on trail. So here's my first example here. And what I'm going to mention here first is having things accessible when you're on trail, when you're all strapped up, you got your backpack on, and you're ready to go. The first thing that I would mention is going to be how everything is situated in your pack. So when I first started out, I was like, all right, I'm not going to have anything on my shoulder straps because it's just going to get in the way and things are going to be bouncing on trail. Now I'm a huge fan of that. I would also recommend having hip belt pockets or a fanny pack if you're not a fan of the hip belt pockets, and then putting things in certain places. So my own personal anecdote, I like to have the water bottle pocket and my straw that Jared hates, so it's really easy for me to take a drink. I got my pack towel hanging over here. You got the Garmin or the Zoleo over on the other side for easy access. I've got my cell phone in my pocket, some hand sanitizer. I got my snacks down on one side, a lot going on in my pockets, and then on the other side, I've got things, like a headlamp. We're all content creators here, so I have like batteries. Things like that are just really easy for me to get to. So that's my first bullet point item here, is just making sure when you're out on trail that you have easy access to things. So the last thing you want to do when everything's feeling good and riding right is to take it off or to ask Snackbox to get something out of your backpack, because he will literally yell at you and rip your face off if you ask him that. So making sure that when you're on trail, it's easy to get to. So what do you guys think about that one?
Yeah, man, I think it's great. I think one of the things about it is that you start with where you think things are going to go, and then after a few days on trail, you figure out, they don't actually work where you think they work. And so if you're just open to kind of moving things around, you'll kind of develop your own placement for gear and different items on it naturally, and especially if you're not super rigid about it. Yep.
I feel like I'm still working on some of that a little bit. I have everything down in the way I pack it, but basically I'm always going to end up switching some things around a little bit because I haven't found what is perfect for me yet. But it's a work in progress. But I think the biggest thing for me is having the things that I use the most, either in the front or the hip belt pockets or a fanny pack, something that's super easily accessible. The shoulder strap pocket, kind of love-hate relationship with that one. Still working on that.
Yeah, I mean, like to further that, I would say definitely like try to get the ones if you're buying a pack and get the ones that are sold by the pack maker. They have a lot that are like universal pockets. I think that's the one that Melissa is kind of talking about, which are great, but they might not necessarily work particularly well with your style of daisy chain or the clips that you have on your shoulder strap or whatever. So I've found in a couple of my packs now that buying the accessories from that maker definitely makes a big difference. Right on. All right, Jared, you're next up in my view here. So I'm gonna spotlight you here. Dive
Yeah,
on
so
into the deep end.
one of the things that I think is really helpful for me is just to have a series. This is meal planning, by the way. Having a series of really easy, inexpensive, readily available meals. So if you sort of get invited on a last minute trip, you have a few in mind that you can run into a grocery store, grab them and go. For me, that's typically, a lot of snacks. Trader Joe's is great for that. But the dinner I go to always when I'm in a hurry is either, say, instant mashed potatoes or my personal favorite is the poor man's pad thai that I've talked about a lot, where I'll buy a brick or two of ramen and then a jar of peanut butter and then some tortillas for lunch, for example. And then pretty soon I'm already on my way with 2 of my 3 meals. And if it's just a weekend trip, you've got everything you need pretty quickly, and you can eat the same dinner twice if it's only 2 or 3 nights. So that's not a big deal. But that's my favorite, is to just have a series of things that you can buy quickly at any grocery store, gas station in America, ready to go. And then you can always hop out on the fly if you have an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's very efficient.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I was thinking about too. I think Melissa was talking about that as well, and that's something that I still need work on as well. There's a lot that kind of like goes into trip planning and getting it all together, and TCT was a perfect example of that, Melissa, where I just was trying to throw stuff together like last minute. It was just a disaster, and trying to break everything out. I've gone as far as like breaking out meals by day too. I think that is like extreme on the other end of things, but definitely helps it go a little bit easier when you're out there.
Let me ask this question. Do you guys do a lot of like, I see a lot of people with their meal planning, they'll do, this is my breakfast, this is my dinner, here's my 10 o'clock Snickers that I'm going to eat. And it's like laid out in these individual, this is everything I'm eating in a day. And I wonder if that's mostly like focused around caloric intake and how many calories are being consumed. But I don't ever do that.
I do it, but not necessarily because I'm sort of OCD, or maybe that's not the right word for it, but I'm not super obsessive about it. But I do it because if I'm bonking, then I will burn through 3 or 4 days of food really quickly. So it helps me to know what I can eat throughout the course of the day. And the other thing is, as Dave knows, I'm pretty severely ADHD, so quite literally. So if I don't do that, fun story with that, actually, my brother and I did a week in the Everglades, and at REI, they've got that big box of freeze-dried sort of sample packs or whatever. And so I was so excited about that I packed that. And we literally went into the Everglades for a week with only ingredients, and we had no snacks, no breakfast. So we had vegetable soup for a week, and it was all just like, it was terrible, but literally vegetable soup for a week because I didn't plan it out and sort of separate it. So it's actually, for me, it's also a visual thing to be able to know, like, all right, well, I actually have my meals for those days. But I do know people who are sort of obsessive about the caloric intake as well. That one's not me for sure.
Yeah, I've tried to do that for like a couple of trips where I broke it down by day and then found out that I just didn't eat that much. So it was sort of caloric based, and I still kind of keep that in mind when I'm putting stuff together, but I probably would rarely hit, what my goal was for the day. It's just a lot of chewing. That's why I've kind of messed around with drink powders and stuff like that.
Very cool.
Melissa's laughing like she's got a whole different system at work here.
Not at all. I'm laughing because he said it was a whole lot of chewing.
We like to keep it family friendly on this show. Thanks, Melissa.
No, it's fine. It's just I didn't know, like, I'll eat bars all day long. But I'm on board with Jared on that. Same thing, ADHD. And if I don't have my food sectioned off, I will burn through everything which causes me to overpack
Wow.
food. So the way to correct that problem was to separate everything out. And it's not to the hour, but it is, okay, this is breakfast. These are your snacks. You get, 2 or 3 snacks a day. This is your lunch. That's your dinner. And there's your dessert or whatever. And maybe a couple emergency things. And it just, for me, that's efficient because it stops me from overpacking on food, which I'm still going to do a little bit, but it is far less.
Yep. It does help too with like the preventing you from taking say a breakfast for the day you start or a dinner for the day you're going to finish. It helps save some weight if you do it that way. But that's a marginal savings, I would say.
But I think it also like you're planning for a solo trip versus if you're going with a group.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar, or any of you familiar with the Knowles bulk ration food system?
I'm not.
That system,
tell us a little bit about it.
So essentially, they'll take out big groups of people. So Knowles is the National Outdoor Leadership School in Lander, Wyoming, and they'll do trips that are like 30 days long, and they'll just be out in the backcountry for that long. So you can't pack for like 10 people 30 days worth of freeze-dried meals. That's also not very good on the gut. So they'll do bulk foods that are like flour and pancake mix and TVP meats and cheese, and it's just raw ingredients. And then to start the day, or grab your bag of food, and usually it's broken up into larger groups of cook groups. So 3-4 people at a time. You're cooking for everybody in that group, and it in that case is super efficient in a cooking setting, and also weight and bulk of the amount of food. But by the end of the trip, it basically leads you to a buffet of a bunch of random whatever's left over in the bags. So you might have like calzones that are filled with TVP and salami and leftover cheese, like whatever. But it's a pretty cool system. But it's interesting to learn about because it's helped me be more efficient in my food planning so that I'm not actually overpacking. Because I think that's what people do most often with their food, is they overpack and carry too much food.
For sure. I've seen people who, because of the overpacking, I've seen people who take half the food that they need on, I do a lot of the sort of longer hikes, and they'll take like half the food and then get to camps with other people and just ask what people are ready to give up. And every single time they save, I mean, somebody's always ready to give up something and pass it over. So they've been, I've seen that quite a bit, actually.
It sounds like when I'm out with my college students.
Right.
Yeah. Super minimalist. Love it. All right, Melissa, you're up.
A couple of mine were kind of taken-ish already.
Well, you shouldn't have showed your notes at the beginning.
Read
on you.
Jared's cheating.
Okay, so here's one that no one's talked about yet. So as far as trip planning, one way I try and be efficient with my trip planning is here in the Adirondacks, it's not always possible to hike the hike that you want to hike just because you want to. Really, that doesn't mean much. So I will actually plan several hikes for a particular area or region so I can pivot quickly and not lose time if I get to where I want to hike and for whatever reason there's no parking, or maybe it's just a holiday weekend and it's really crowded and I don't want to encounter that many people. It just allows me to not have to start over while I'm already on my trip. That's what I got.
That's a solid one. I definitely do that as well. Just yeah, I mean, it's also good practice just for safety's sake, right? Like it's great to avoid people, but it's also good if you need some bailouts, if you need to get out quickly, or take an alternate route to end it, or maybe somebody you're hiking with is in that type of situation. So I think that's awesome. That's one great point about trip planning, and we can kind of go down the rabbit hole on that one.
Yeah, I think having a sort of that research done in advance can come in handy in 1,000 different ways, not the least of which is, say you have a friend who you don't know their ability level and you can pivot to a hike that's a little friendlier for them, or maybe the weather's bad, or I mean, any number of, if somebody asks for a recommendation, you've got those on lock. That's really smart.
Mhm.
Plus, planning's the best part anyway. So
According to you or according to Patty?
both of us, right?
Right on. That's a good one. I think this was in Devin's wheelhouse as well. Maybe he can expand on that one. But Devin,
Yep.
what do you
Yep.
got
I'll
for your
jump
first
into that. I was gonna focus on waypoints and using the satellite imagery that we have access to be able to find uh, campsite options ahead of time. Specifically, if you're going into an area that is dispersed camping opportunity where you don't have to reserve a site ahead of time and it's not designated. So being able to go into the national forest or in my case, in the desert, there's plenty of opportunities to camp pretty much anywhere you want. So I spent a lot of time on Google Earth checking options for campsites in a place that maybe I've not been to before. And then I'll go on to whatever mapping app that I use and I will put a waypoint with some notes and information about what was around that area, as well as just being able to navigate to it easier. But I find that putting waypoints in on your mapping app for your offline use is so handy in not only being able to see how far from camp you are, like how fast you're moving, but it makes it a lot easier to know this is how far I'm from water. And you can actually see if you're using the right tool, you can measure how far that site where that area is from water. Because some areas, like in the Uinta Mountains where I'm at, they do require in heavy use areas for you to be a quarter mile away from a lake if you're going to have a fire. So there's obviously like leave no trace, don't be within 200 feet, 200 yards or whatever from a water source, but you want to have a fire, you got to be a quarter mile from a lake. So being able to measure that ahead of time and see what actual viable campsites are instead of like, oh, this is an awesome campsite, and then you're not in a good spot where you think you are. I think that saves time, so you're not wasting time like trying to find a place to camp for the night.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think you're the first one that I saw kind of like touting that. I think you had mentioned on your channel before too. It's also good just to like keep notes, especially if you're going on a bunch of trips of where cool stuff is, right? Like where was it along the trail that had this beautiful waterfall or something else, some other kind of outlook or whatever. It's just a good way to keep notes. So that's excellent. Anybody else wants to add to that?
Yeah, I think it goes in line with also knowing how to read those topographical maps to get a good sense of where there's likely to be flat campsites and water resources. So if you know how to kind of look at a map and see the likelihood of a drainage being somewhere, that really helps as well for any of those situations when you're planning. And kind of the through line between all of ours is doing a little bit of work on the front end really pays off and saves time while you're in the backcountry as well.
I wish I could use some of those tips. It's not really applicable here, unfortunately. There's not anything, I can't say there's not anything above tree line, but it's limited. You can only camp in certain areas.
Yep.
All the campsites are right by water sources. In a huge chunk of where I am, there are no fires allowed, period. So, but maybe someday. I'll remember that.
Sounds good. All right. I'm going to kick off round 2 here. And my bullet point is going to be tent efficiency. So I'm going to pull up my notes here. I'm also going to bring up some B-roll and post. I already told the guys this, but with my computer failures so far, I'm going to have to put it in post. So just imagine it for everybody else and all the co-hosts here. But for tent efficiency here, I'm going to mention mostly about tent setup and breakdown. And we're going to start with when you're thinking about purchasing your tent or purchasing a new tent, right? So some tents require extra stakes and pullouts, a la my Lanchan 1 that Jared and Melissa both saw on the Smokies. It was kind of not that great of an experience because I felt like I needed to do at least 2 out of the 3 pullouts for like the head end and the back wall every single time I set it up in order to get some decent interior living space. And basically what that ended up doing was taking me a lot longer to set up the tent when Jared had his Gossamer Gear, the 1, already set up, and he was like halfway done eating his meal by the time I was done setting up my tent. So it's not really just about setting up the tent and the time or the expertise that it takes. It's also about, really like what you need to do to dial it in. That might take some extra time. So shaving off some of that time so that you can enjoy your camp time is pretty excellent. And then the other part of this is going to be when you're setting your tent up, right? So what I like to do is I like to leave a little bit of space in my guy lines so that you have enough left when you stake everything out so that you can use the line locks and really tighten that down and get it taut. And then the next piece is going to be to talk about the interior of the tent. So things like, if there are any mods or putting your gear in a certain spot so that you can get to it more easily at night. If you're in bear country, make sure that the bear spray is around so that you can have it handy, or your headlamp so that you can actually see at night, things like that. So specific to my use case would be, I recently picked up the shelf. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, like sort of like a ridgeline organizer for my Gossamer Gear, the 1. But what it does is there's limited space in the bathtub floor, so I can't really like get easy access to things. So this gets it up off the ground. I have more organization. I also slip my phone in there so I can watch some movies or a show at night. So that's all part of like setting it up and getting everything out and easily accessible. And then when talking about the breakdown portion of it, you may have heard of either the fold or stuff method when you're putting it away in a stuff sack, your tent away in a stuff sack. But I like to go with a roll method, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that one or not. Again, throwing this B-roll up on screen in the background here, but think of it where, you roll up the sides closest to like your front door and the back wall first towards each other in the middle, and then either from the head end or foot end, I roll it up in that direction next. So I found that stuffing doesn't really work super well, not only for a tent, well, for me personally, not only for a tent, but also for, a sleeping bag or a quilt. I just couldn't really figure that volume wise how to make that work super well for me. And then I've heard that folding may over time create creases in certain areas and degrade the quality of the material. I'm not sure if that's actually true or BS. Devin might have some insight on that one, but I've always just rolled it and it's been okay for me. It keeps it a little bit cleaner. Last one I would say on that one is to just shake it out, whether you have a freestanding or non-freestanding tent. Open up your door before you go put it away, and then just shake out all the debris that's in it, and then close the door and roll it up from there. So that's my second one, tent efficiency. What y'all think about that?
I wish I had it.
Come on, Durston.
You saw me.
Yeah,
I was riding the struggle bike.
Step your game up.
I was a slob.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I do think having a routine seems to work really nicely too for making sure that you're moving in a good direction, especially when you get to camp and you're tired and maybe a little dehydrated, not thinking straight. Just having a routine really helps to make sure that you're moving forward in a good direction, not leaving something undone,
Yeah, and what can make that one difficult too is if you're cycling in and out of different tents, right? So you might be really used to one, and then all of a sudden you're taking out one that you're not used to as much, and you're like, well, wait, I'm used to like putting stuff in certain areas, and
it sounded a little bit like you were hooching around the campsite, cycling through different tents. I was like, hey, this is
gotta get your camp game on.
Yeah, terrible.
All right, Jared, you got another one for us?
Yeah, this one might be a little bit controversial, but leave a trace, man. Leave no trace is woefully inefficient. I say, like, leave your tent in the backcountry and start a fire wherever you need it. It's a lot faster that way. Camp near the water. Who cares, right? No, I'm just playing, obviously. Um, for me, this is actually similar to yours about the tent efficiency. And it's a little trick that I learned a while ago. Most people probably know it, but when you get your first stuff sack, when you start setting up camp, every other stuff sack you get and ditty bag, put them inside the first one. And that way in the morning, you're not digging through a pile of stuff looking for stuff sacks. You just pull them all out. They're all together. It's the easiest, saves a ton of time. It's the easiest way to keep everything together and not lose them, because that's probably for me been the number one thing that I've lost over and over again. I mean, I lost a whole bag to a sleeping bag in a windstorm once, which was really a bummer for a number of different reasons. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, and a good pro tip to keep everything organized. Unless you have is it the Sea to Summit? Is it Alto or Altos that
It's
has?
both of them.
Okay, yeah, they have the feature where you have stuff sacks that double as your interior pockets in your tent. It's pretty cool design.
Oh wow, little kangaroo action. That's how they do it down there in the down under.
Right.
All day, every day.
Yeah, isn't it like in New Zealand, or is it New Zealand or Australia? It's one of those two. That's where Sea to Summit's from.
Australia.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
Australia.
see? Yeah, they looked at a kangaroo and they're like, "We'll do that, mate."
I love their porch mode too. Kind of getting off topic, but I thought that was pretty nifty for a tent to be able
Yeah.
to jack that up and just get out of a storm.
I do think I mean, to follow that rabbit hole for just a second, I have found that my experience with Sea to Summit, everything has been really positive, and that when they do something that's sort of innovative or risky, they have thought it out really thoroughly, and it always works really nicely. So I think I like that company quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely pretty innovative. All right, Melissa, kicking it back over to you.
Okay, we kind of touched on this, Dave, you did in the beginning, but I always pack my backpack the same way. So everything at the very bottom is things that I don't need until I get to camp. So tent, sleeping pad, pillow. On top of that, it's probably going to be clothes, electronics, and then like insulating layers on top of that. Probably the tent and then the food, a couple other things mixed in there depending on what I'm doing. And that way, when I'm packing up after camping, it helps me not forget things because everything is always going in the same order, in and out.
Yeah, that's a good one. I definitely do that as well. I think all of us have similar style of packs, right? I think where we just kind of just have that one sleeve primarily, where we're just going top down. So particularly with that style where there's not a lot of organization, different zippers and different pockets for keeping your stuff separated. Yeah, you really need to dial that in and know where it stacks up so that you can get to what you need to in a certain order.
I've had people rake me across the coals for putting my tent down against my sleeping bag at like the bottom of my backpack. Classic YouTube commenters. Just, how dare you put your tent at the bottom of your pack like that? What if it's raining? You're gonna get all of your gear wet, pulling your pack out or your tent very last. And it's just funny how everybody does things their own way. But it works. So I'm a tent at the bottom of my pack too, Melissa. I like it.
I'm a tent on the outside. I got the little, like the Gossamer gear, the Six Moon designs, and just put it in that side pocket. Works for me. Keeps me from getting my gear wet. I mean, some people are still new to the sport and put it on the bottom, and they'll learn eventually. I'm just teasing. I'm not being for real. Sorry, everybody.
Welcome, Jared. Meet Devin here. All right, Devin, take us home for round two.
Okay, mine is really niche, but I was trying to come from the perspective of I take out college students like a guide professionally, and so trying to come up with what would make a new backpacker more efficient, and it has to do with footwear, and not just like the discussion of should you wear boots or trail runners, which I think is kind of a silly discussion to have. You should wear whatever you want to wear. It doesn't really matter. But that's my hot take for the day. So it's kind of like two parts. First is wear the right shoe for the job. Know basically ahead of time what the terrain is going to require. Because I think it's really easy for somebody that is covering a lot of miles to be like, oh, you just need a trail runner, just use some ultras or topos or something that's like really soft and lightweight and has a lot of mesh, so it'll dry super quick. But I don't think that that's the right answer to make like somebody more efficient on the trail. It needs to be the right shoe for the job. So if you're in a really rocky, so Melissa, you're in the Adirondacks area, right?
Mhm.
Tons of granite. Like I don't think that wet granite and certain trail runners mix very well, especially if you're having to do any kind of like a little bit of scrambling going up any of the mountains. You want something that's going to be a little bit stiffer on the toe, give you more assurity of your foot when you're moving on that kind of terrain. So second is using a shoe that has the right rubber as well. Because I found in my area in the desert, when I'm taking students out and I see, like, I make it a point to make sure that students are not going out and spending a bunch of money on stuff. So I say, wear whatever you wear the most often, but a shoe that doesn't have good rubber on it makes you less sure of yourself and can slow you down. And when you get into sketchy situations, can actually cause anxiety and like put you in a mental space that's actually really hard and not fun. So I know it's pretty niche, but I think it is actually something really important that doesn't get talked about enough. Aside from like everybody says trail runners are better than boots. You should only like you shouldn't wear boots, but I disagree. But I digress.
Yeah, no, I actually love the topic. It was actually the topic of one of the podcasts not too long ago. We had Ghost Meal from Everyday Backpacker on. He seems to be pretty knowledgeable about that as well. If you haven't thought about doing a video idea on that, Devin, I would definitely recommend that because I think that would do pretty well. I'm not sure how it would track in the YouTube
It's on the
algorithm,
list.
yeah, that's a really good one. I think people can get a lot of good information from that one. And then I would also piggyback off of that and say just foot care in general. Make sure your med kit's kind of like up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with blisters, dealing with foot pain too. Carry a cork ball, something else to roll it out. Your feet are probably one of the most important pieces of your person that you bring on trail, right? Because if your feet are screaming, you're not going to really go that far.
Yeah, I think a good pair of socks is, I mean, I never thought I would spend $20 on a pair of socks, but they are worth every penny, especially if they have that sort of compression quality, like a good pair of Balegas or something. They've saved me more times than I can count for sure.
Yep. Totally. All right. I think we have a little bit of time left. You don't have to feel obligated for a third round here. I'm going to throw one in here because I got one, and it is all about kit organization is what I'm going to mention next here. And specifically, I'm going to say here, I'm going to throw this out. Don't necessarily feel obligated to only organize stuff by their dedicated kit, right? So when you're thinking about kits, you're thinking about like electronics kit, med kit, your bear bag, your food kit, stuff like that, toiletries, ditties, and every single piece within that kit has to be in that kit. A prime example of that for me is that I have like my toothbrush and my toothpaste in my food bag because the toothpaste is what Dan over at Backpacking Adventures coined as a smellable. So anything that has like a scent, I want to make sure that I have in that bag and I don't forget about it, particularly if I want to have the toiletry kit in my tent at night. I don't want to make it more work for for myself to have to think like, well, what smells and what doesn't? What do I have to take out of one kit to put into another? And again, that's just me personally. So I kind of like to wrangle things that way, but everybody kind of does things differently. But I would say like just take another look at how you organize your kits and how you kind of put stuff together, and think about it sort of like in a use case scenario of either when you're at camp or when you're on trail and you need access to those things, and don't feel obligated to just have everything smashed together based off of what you think conventional wisdom is there. So that's my last one, is kit organization.
That is a solid point. It really is. I never would have thought to put my toothbrush and toothpaste in my food bag, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it saves,
Or you
saves a lot of
could just
trouble.
you could just not brush your teeth.
It's also true. Much more
Jared
efficient.
doesn't. Jared doesn't at all.
Hold
He
on.
doesn't shower. He lets everybody walk behind him on trail, and he just stinks it up.
That's I don't even know where to begin with that one.
Own it.
It's a
No.
contest, and he owns it. Yes, yes.
I did
Okay,
hike
Jared,
behind
you
a
have
guy once who thought that Axe body spray was deodorant, and that was a rough one. It smelled like pineapple armpits for 2 days. It was pretty rough.
Ooh,
Yeah.
bad cocktail.
Right. Yeah. So my next one, or the last one here, is a lot of people like those, like the water bladders, the Camelbacks and stuff. And what I find to be much more efficient than using one of those, that I think they leak a lot. So I just like to pour the water directly into my backpack. It saves me a lot of time. I can go ahead and deal with the wet stuff everywhere. No, the other one I have is actually something that Patty does a lot better than I do, but that's to stock up on stuff at say Sierra, the discount stores, and that way, especially consumables, that way whenever you get ready to go on a trip, you're not scrambling to find somewhere that sells isobutane. Get a couple of those and have them on stock, or a little bit of freeze-dried meals, those kind of things. You know you're going to use them, go ahead and get them. They keep for a long, long time.
I would add to that when you go to any kind of restaurant, or if you're on vacation or something, and you're getting food, take note of what single serve like packets they have available for their food. So I was in Zion National Park, for example, and in the little cafe they had mayo, mustard, but they had Tapatio packets.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I've never seen Tapatio packets.
Panera carries Cholula
like that. It's fantastic. So I grabbed like a handful of them. I'm like, yeah, I'm using this. This is fantastic.
You go to the right places, you can get sriracha, you can get the Tapatio is a really good one, the Cholula. They have a bunch. I mean, they have a lot of different stuff that you can get. And I think the brown sugar packets at Starbucks, you can get there as well. So there are a lot that if you have a list of the different ones you can get, definitely worth having and keeping just a little stack, put a couple in your food bag. You don't know what you'll put it on, but it's going to make it a lot better no matter what.
Or like McDonald's has grape and strawberry preserves.
Jam.
Yep.
With jam.
Yep. KFC has honey. That's a good one.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. They're definitely not as easy to find on Amazon either to buy that stuff in bulk. I've heard that Jared freaked out so much once before a trip that he just ended up buying like everything from takeout to try and do that exact thing, just to make sure that he had his packet game on point.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of Chinese takeout, and I didn't even bother. I took it out of the styrofoam and put it in my bear can just as a stew, and took scoops wherever I went. It was pretty. It was delicious. Little General Tso's teriyaki fried rice oatmeal for breakfast. It was delicious.
I smell a new Gorp video on the horizon for that one.
But true story, my sister-in-law gave me maple wet Gorp, which is pretty hilarious. Yeah.
All right, good segue. Go ahead, Melissa.
All right. This maybe is a little unusual, but the actual hiking efficiency. So what I try to do doesn't always work out, but I try to hike at a slower but consistent pace to minimize the need for breaks. And I don't stop just because the clock says it's lunchtime. I only stop and eat if I feel like I have to stop to eat. I minimize breaks overall. And that just gets me moving further, in theory.
I've seen a similar. I've got a buddy who his thing is to not put your backpack down.
Yeah.
That you can take a break and you can take a 5-minute break, but once you take your backpack off, it's 20 minutes almost every time. So certainly take breaks, but make sure you know when you're taking the backpack off that you're giving up quite a bit of time.
1000%.
That's a good point. I definitely heed that advice when I'm going uphill for sure. My pace slows way down when I'm going uphill versus downhill.
Yeah, but to Melissa's point too, I mean the idea is that slow and steady really is faster than sort of burn and stop, burn and stop, burn and stop. And plus it's better to Devin's point earlier about kind of keeping an eye on your mental game, right? If you're stopping for a lot of breaks, that can be really mentally exhausting. Whereas if you're making steady progress, you can see that progress, and it has the reverse effect, I think, at least for me.
And in addition, when you take like little micro breaks, that's all it has to be. You know, if you're going uphill, you just might have to stop for 5 seconds to kind of catch a quick breath and then start going again, knowing that when you get to the top, then you can take maybe a 5-minute break if you really feel like you need it.
Yeah, that's true. So does that mean that like we're the worst hikers ever because we're content creators and we're stopping every 5 seconds to get a shot? Little inception there. I mean. All right, Devin, you got last licks here.
All right, mine's kind of a curveball, but it's wake up for the sunrise.
Ooh.
That's it. That's all I'm saying. No, but seriously, wake up for the sunrise because A, it's beautiful, and it's my favorite time of the day. And then you're already awake, and it's a lot easier for you to get moving, to get your stuff packed up, than if you sleep in till 8 or 9 in the morning. And now it's like sunny and starting to get that like weird hot in your tent. You know what I'm talking about.
We're starting to smell the plastic.
Yeah. So wake up for the sunrise and just enjoy a little bit slower morning that way. But I find that I'm ready to start hiking for the day sooner and faster than if I decide I'm going to sleep in and wait to pack up.
I've used a sort of adaptation of that, Devin, in the years when I've done the Colorado Trail and the JMT, and that's to wake up and be hiking by 5:30 or so. So wake up 2 hours earlier, but have a 2-hour break during the height of the heat of the day. So say,
sure. Yeah.
like noon to 2, I stop. So it's the same hours hiking, but I make better miles because right before once the sun comes down, that adds 10, 15 pounds to your pack weight, at least in terms of how it feels, right? Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And hiking in the morning's nice too, because everything's so still and quiet. You don't really, you get the woods to yourself in a way everybody else doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that is solid. Or if you're a Jared or myself, we like to do a challenge that is stay awake for the sunset before going to sleep way too early. That's sort of a challenge. It's sort of like the New Year's Eve ball drop for us hikers sometimes out there. Okay, that's a great roundup, solid roundup. Hopefully it became a little bit more clear for the topic and what we're kind of shooting for there. And hopefully you guys ended up grabbing some good information from this. This is a pre-recorded episode, so if this was a live chat on the I don't know, the playback here, thanks for joining. If not, if you're catching this one later, hit us up in the comments down below. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. I'm not going to put up the socials this time. It's the first episode where I haven't done that, just because I'll throw it in the description. Everybody can find that, and or everybody already knows who we are. I do want to give a special plug to Devin because he recently started a Patreon page, so check him out over there. He's got some great stuff that he is launching for that Patreon page. But that's it. It's going to do it for this one. A great kickoff into the new year here of 2024 with the GEARHAULICS cast. Thanks everybody for joining tonight, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I dug through a lot, and it turns out it's actually harder to get a good picture of you now because you've got so many videos that when I click on the silly thumbnail, it starts playing, so I can't really time it that well.